Hello, lovely people of the internet. I'm the chosen Epicurus, which means that I'm an ex-ultra-Orthodox Jew, a Jewish apostate, or an off the derech, whatever you would want to call it. And today we're going to be talking, and I'm going to be offering some commentary about the Netflix series Rough Diamonds. I'm also an undergraduate student of Jewish philosophy, so in my commentary I'm going to be referring to both my lived knowledge as an ex-Orthodox person and also based on my academic knowledge. Okay, let's jump right into it. So the opening scene was one of the most surprisingly accurate moments of this series. We see Yankee in bed in the morning and he opens his eyes and the first thing that he says is a prayer called Modeh Ani. Modeh Ani literally means I am thankful, and it's a prayer that a Jewish person is required to say when they wake up in the morning to say thanks for their soul returning to their body. So basically in Judaism, when one is asleep, the belief is that not only we fall asleep, but also that we are partially dead. So a major part of the soul is leaving the body during the time of sleep and is wandering out and about, in the spheres. And that's why we have dreams, because we encounter people, we get some hidden messages. And this is very interesting because the ancient Egyptians also believed in that. So it's very interesting that we also find it in Judaism. So you say thank you for the soul returning to the body. And the next thing you do is you wash your hands with this mug called the natla. And you basically do that because during the time that the soul leaves the body, an unpure spirit possesses the body and replaces it. So this is something that we see a lot in the Bible, for instance. So when King Saul, when God's Holy Spirit left his body, there was an evil spirit that replaced his body instead. So we see the same thing with any person that their soul leaves their body, automatically an evil spirit comes instead. That's why dead people in Judaism are considered impure, because there is an impure spirit possessing their body. And the reason why you wash your hands is because spirits always leave the body through the nails of the hand. So in Judaism, if someone is possessed and you're doing this expelling of the evil spirit, then sometimes the nails would be damaged. And also the water that you use to wash your hands is called in Yiddish Nägelwasser, which means the water of the nails, which basically means that the nails are the thing that is impure, because that's where the evil spirit resides, and you wash your hands in order to expel the evil spirit. So that's something very interesting. I do have to say that not in every community you would have the water next to your bed. For instance, in my house, we had a sink that was very close to the bedroom. So it was considered close enough that we could just leave our beds, go to the sink and wash our hands, and we didn't keep the Nägelwasser right near our beds. That's just something interesting. Now, the thing that is missing to me between the time that he wakes up in the morning, says the morning prayer, the quick prayer that you say when you wake up, and washes his hands and he goes to work, the thing that is missing to me is the morning prayer, because the Modeh Ani thing that he said in the morning is not the morning prayer. It's just the prayer that you say when you wake up. So there is another prayer, a longer prayer, that you usually say amongst other 10 men, at least, which is Tfilat Shacharit, the Jewish morning prayer. And he isn't going to attend it. So I don't know if it's because the creators of the series didn't go down to the resolution of like how the daily life would look like, or if they just wanted to move on the schedule. But normally any Jewish ultra-Orthodox person that would go to work would first attend synagogue, shul, would pray the morning prayer, and only then would go to work. And we do see that Yankee is pretty observant, so I would have expected him to do that, especially because of what is going to happen. By the way, Yankee is just a Yiddish nickname for Jacob. So his name is Yaakov or Jacob, and the nickname that is used is Yankee. So we see that Yankee goes into work and he works in diamonds, which is traditionally really something that Jews in Belgium did. Jews were, throughout history, were merchants, had to work in finance or in trading. In some countries, like in Italy, it was specifically second-hand trading. They weren't even allowed to trade in first-hand goods. So in many countries, Jews were traditionally traders because they weren't allowed to work in any other work. They were only allowed to be merchants or money lenders or something like that, and they were not allowed to do any liberal work. I've discovered lately that a lot of people are not aware of it, so yeah, it's true. And that's why Jews are traditionally merchants, and I can tell you that on my maternal side of the family, I come from Central Asia. There was a Jewish community there for thousands of years, but my maternal grandfather, his family was brought as a gift to the emir of the time because it was the Emirate of Bukhara. His family was brought as a gift because they were such good merchants. So they were just given as a gift from the Emirate in Baghdad to the Emirate of Bukhara. So Jews were basically, during the Middle Ages, some kind of a property, and they were just given away. You also see in my mom's community, which is all the way back in Central Asia, you still see a lot of people trading in diamonds. And it's not because Jews are obsessed about money, it's because it was what they were allowed to do. They weren't allowed to do other stuff. We do see that during periods of time when Jews were allowed to be other things, such as in Al-Andalus in Spain, Jews were doing a lot of poetry, a lot of them were philosophers, and a lot of them worked in medicine and stuff like that. So Jews did want to do all those things, and when they were allowed to do it, they did it. And me, a Jew in the 21st century, I'm allowed to study philosophy, and this is what I do for a living. I'm not all about money. I just offer you to, check your biases and about Jews and really learn about what it was like to be a Jew throughout history. Anyways, the next scene that we're going to be talking about is a very unpleasant, unaliving scene. So if that's triggering for you or anything like that, please skip like the next, 5 to 10 minutes. So we see that Yankee goes into work and he is unaliving himself. Now, we can see that when this happens, he says a prayer. So the prayer that he's saying is called Shema Israel. It's very similar to the Muslim Shahada. It's also used in a similar way. So basically, Shema Israel, it's a verse from the Bible. Listen, O Israel, it's a declaration of faith. Yahweh is our God. It's a declaration of faith. So Jews would say it every morning and every evening in the prayers. You also say it right before you go to sleep. And you also say it if you join Judaism or right before you die. Those are the times that you would say the Shema Israel. And we see that Yankee is a very devout Jew, even though he's about to commit a very great sin in Judaism. It's very important for him to die as a Jew and to say the Shema right before he dies. Now, after he passes away, after he unalives himself, there is this issue around his burial, and we see that some people don't want to be buried near Yankee. And this is something that I have to tell you, traditional Jews, especially well-off Jews, buy their property of burial ahead. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that in some communities, such as in the community of Prague, for instance, Jews weren't really offered a lot of burial spaces, so Jews are buried there one on top of the other in a very weird and sad way. And maybe it has to do with that. Maybe it has to do with the fact that it's believed in Judaism that if you buy property of burial ahead, then you would live a long life. This is a common belief in Judaism, so maybe it has to do with that. But anyways, traditionally, if you unalive yourself, then you're not allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. you're only allowed to be buried outside the cemetery perimeters, right outside of the fence. It's called a donkey's burial. And it's not practiced anymore because religions are ever evolving, and the more humanity started to understand mental health, rabbis started to approach this subject completely differently, and they understand that usually people unalive themselves because of grief, some serious mental health issues. So you normally would just bury the person normally, even if they unalive themselves, even though for hundreds of years it wasn't the case. So we do see that the Yankee is just going to be buried normally, but some people in the community are just like, what, I'm going to be buried next to this person? Like, I don't want to. And it's because, as I said, it's new. It's a new thing that a person that unalived themselves would be buried in a normal Jewish cemetery. So probably that's why there is this big deal around the burial. I also would like to move on and talk about the burial ceremony. So, in my opinion, the family is dressed too nicely for a burial. I haven't been to a lot of burials because in my community, Bukhari Jews, Jews from Central Asia, females don't really go to the cemetery, so I was never in a traditional Jewish burial, but I did study the rules and regulations behind it in my Jewish studies, so I do know about it theoretically. I do think that they're not dressed properly for a burial. I think that people would be dressed less nicely, but I'm not sure if there might be a rule that you're not allowed to change your clothes the entire time that you are in mourning, which is 7 days. So maybe they're just stuck with the clothes that they're already wearing. There are a lot of rules around Jewish grief, and I would get into it in a minute, but one thing is that Jews don't wear black for funerals. So I called a person that I know from that community in Belgium and I asked about it, and she told me that normally Jewish people in Belgium, the women at least, tend to wear black. So they're not wearing black because it's a funeral, they're just wearing black because this is what women in that community wear, which makes sense. And also, you can see that the little girls are not in black, so it makes sense that the reason why the older women are in black is not because of the service, it's just because this is what they normally wear. Also, something that you should notice is that outside of Israel, people are buried in caskets, but in Israel they're not. So at first when I saw the footage, I was like, wait, they're doing something inaccurate here because I never heard of a Jewish person buried in a casket. So I had to ask around some people who know the rules, and I confirmed that it's because it happens overseas. So only outside of Israel people are buried in caskets, but it's not a tradition within the land of Israel to be buried in a casket. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to discuss is that suddenly in the middle of the burial, this person who doesn't even look like the rest of the family, doesn't dress like the rest of the family, just shows up and everyone seems very uncomfortable. This is me in family occasions. I do try to get dressed up for that, but I am a non-binary person and sometimes I just don't feel comfortable being in a dress or wearing the traditionally feminine clothes. So sometimes it's me, I have a special occasion that I want to attend. I want to pay my respects and I'm in trousers and everyone is just staring at me and moving uncomfortably. But it's just the reality because some of us aren't ultra-orthodox anymore and we still love our families and want to pay respect. So I was very mood vibing, that moment of the guy showing up to his brother's funeral and everyone is just moving uncomfortably because he's not dressed like everyone else. Then the person who left the community and his sister Adina are discussing the fact that the traditionally normal profession for an ultra-Orthodox woman is to be a teacher. And that's true. I myself attended a Jewish teachers training college, and it's something that all over the world ultra-Orthodox Jewish women have to attend, even if there aren't going to be teachers eventually. You just have to learn how to be a teacher. There's a long story behind it. I might get into it in another video if you request, so you can ask in the comments, but I'm not going to get into it right now. But in the late years, ultra-Orthodox women are in almost all professions. So 2 of my sisters are architects, and Adina is a diamond trader. So it is something that changed throughout the years, and we see ultra-Orthodox women doing other things that isn't teaching. And Jewish communities around the world just have to accept it. And most of them do. So, yeah. Also, there is a discussion with Adina about the ex-ultra-Orthodox sibling, that his status is like, oh, you're like a dead person to the family. So it's true to European Jews. European Jews traditionally would mourn someone who became an apostate as if they died. Luckily for me, by the time I left the community, there were too many people who left the community, so the tradition wasn't really practiced anymore, because like when you have every single building in my neighborhood had one kid that became an apostate at least. So you wouldn't be mourning so many people. It's just not realistic. And also my mom is not a European Jew, as I already mentioned, so she wouldn't do that. So luckily for me, my family didn't mourn me as if I died, but they did not talk to me for many years, and even nowadays we don't have the closest relationship. I don't see them almost at all. So it's very complicated to be an ex-ultra-Orthodox person. That's why different countries have different systems of support to help people like us, because we're like immigrants that are coming into a new society, don't know how to behave, don't know the rules, don't know anything basically, and we just need to fit into a new place and learn everything from the beginning. And there are researchers that proved that Jewish apostates are just like immigrants in the new societies that they decide to join. So that's very interesting. And again, we see the ex-ultra-Orthodox brother with his son, which was very intriguing. I want to know more about the son. Who is he? Is he Jewish? Is his mom Jewish? Because if his mom isn't Jewish, he's not Jewish. I was surprised that Adina just accepted him without asking if he was Jewish or not. I don't know, maybe she knows about him more than I know. And he takes him to eat cholent, which cholent is like this food that Jewish people eat during the Sabbath in the morning. And I consider it my ultimate comfort food. So it makes sense that after a funeral, this is what he would want to eat, because for me, it's the ultimate comfort food. I also wanted to discuss the language that is being spoken. So this is a very inaccurate part of the series, because the family keeps talking to each other in Flemish, which doesn't happen. I know that community, people in that community do not speak in Flemish. They speak in Hebrew, they speak in Yiddish, they speak in English, they speak in French. They do not speak to each other in Flemish. So that was very like, it kept pulling me out of the story, because even when they did speak Yiddish, their Yiddish sounded like with such a heavy Flemish accent, and it would never happen. But people in that community, people from the Antwerp, Belgian community, the Jews there, they just speak so many languages. Like, I have friends from there and they can just speak fluent Hebrew, and then they switch into fluent English, and then they're like speaking fluent French, and I'm just like, dude, like, how can you speak so many languages perfectly, like with a perfect accent, have a perfect vocabulary? Like, what is happening? So this is something very cool about that community, because they're a community of merchants, and a lot of people come and go from all kinds of countries, and they settle down there, and the entire community just speaks all the languages. Now, if you've noticed, Adina is wearing head covering when she's at the house, but when she's outside and about, is she not covering her head? Do Jewish women only cover their hair in the house? Like, what's happening? So let me tell you a secret. She's wearing a wig when she's out and about, and all ultra-Orthodox women do that. They wear wigs. It has to do with a lot of history of regulations on the Jews. Like once the Enlightenment was a thing, emperors in Europe tried to assimilate Jews into society, and they were like, you're not going to get dressed that way. And Jewish women were like, well, we still want to cover our hair. So they started wearing wigs. And that's something very interesting because Jews from Arab countries don't do that. They still wear just a scarf as a head covering. So that's something to notice. And I also wanted to discuss the big deal around gambling. I mean, obviously, if you figured out that a family member is gambling, you'd be like, oh, that's unfortunate. But in Yankee's case, we see that he didn't want to ask for help, that everyone was very ashamed and stuff like that. So the Talmud, which is like the Bible, but it's like the side manual to the Bible, let's say. The Talmud forbids gambling and says that anyone who gambles is not fit to be a part of society. So that's why we see that there's like this big issue around Yankee's gambling problem and the fact that they don't want to acknowledge it and they don't want to help, and he didn't want to ask for help, and there was such shame around it. So that's something important that I think the series portrayed very well. We can also see in the car wash scenes where the brother who's no longer observant is behaving in a way that is surprising the gangster. So he's like, just be a good Jew. Like, why are you acting that way? You're a Jew. And that's the difference between, I guess, like being a Jew of exile versus being a Jew of the diaspora. So a lot of ultra-Orthodox people are still in the mindset that we're punished by God and we're still in the diaspora as a punishment. And their reaction to anti-Semitism slurs and stuff like that would be very submissive, very not confrontational. They would face it like very quietly and obediently, versus Jews that don't believe in that, you know, secular Jews that would be like, no, you would not speak to me that way and you would not behave that way. And I think that that gangster was used to observant Jews that were more like submissive, more like non-confrontational, ones that accept like, yeah, people are gonna hate us, that's our fate, that's what God wants us to be like, versus a Jew that is like, no, I'm not gonna face that. And growing up in a Jewish state myself, I would react like the secular brother, because I didn't grow up with anti-Semitism being a reality that I had to face. And I would not take it. I would not be nice about it. And I think that that's also something that was portrayed very nicely, like the difference between the ultra-Orthodox family and the secular brother, like how they would handle the same situation completely differently because of their set of belief and because of the dogmas that they operate from, I guess. The last thing that I would want to discuss for today's video, not to make it too long, is like protecting the family's honor. You see the ex-ultra-Orthodox brother being like, the only thing you care is about the family name. Like, you care about it more than you care about our dead brother. And that's something that I already explained in another video. I explained it in the video about unorthodox. So I explained like why in the unorthodox series the fact that Esti is an orphan is like this big deal. So basically, like, if one of your family members died in a disgraceful way, your points in the community go down. And this is something that you have like this virtual point system attached to you. I would urge you to just go and watch that video to get a better explanation, because I can't make this video too long. Okay, so this was my commentary for the first episode of Rough Diamonds. Do you want me to do a second episode? Then leave a thumbs up so I would know. And thank you so much that you watched so far, and I hope that I'm gonna see you in the next video. Please comment below your kind thoughts about this video. Bye!